Today we're going to be covering one of the topics we've gotten asked a lot of questions about recently. So I did a short video on grips, but today we're going to go into everything grips. We're going to talk about Continental, we're going to talk about Eastern, we're going to talk about semi-Western, and we're going to talk about Western. So we're going to talk about all the different grip variations you can use, what are the advantages, what are the drawbacks, and what you should be doing to get better. The first grip we're going to talk about, and the most important, is going to be Continental. So Continental is the same way you would hold like a hammer or something like that. So if I hold the paddle in my opposite hand, I grab it like I'm picking up a hammer like this. This grip allows us to very easily go from the backhand to the forehand. The next grip is going to be Eastern. So for these other grips, we're going to use this index finger knuckle to tell us which grip we're in. So Eastern, that knuckle should be on the flat part of your paddle, on this part, like this. Okay, this grip is going to let us get more spin, a little more power. It's a very good forehand grip that a lot of the pros use for their drives and drops. You can see how when I went from Continental to Eastern, my hand crawled around the paddle. You'll see it continue to do that for these last two grips. So for semi-Western, that knuckle goes on the edge of the flat part right there. This grip is going to allow us to get even more spin, and it's going to be even more forehand dominant. The last grip is full Western. This is what a lot of pro tennis players are using these days. It's coming into pickleball now. It's the most extreme grip. That knuckle is now even past the flat part onto the next ridge on the paddle. This is going to be your ultimate forehand spin grip, but there are a lot of drawbacks to each of these grips. Okay, so now we're going to talk about three different spots on the court. The first is going to be the baseline. So this is going to be our serves, our returns, our third shots, and possibly our bailout defensive, we're getting back here trying to stay in the point. So the first grip we're going to talk about back here is Continental. So Continental from the baseline is not as common as Continental in other places. I would still say close to 50% of people do it here, but there are some drawbacks. One of them is going to be it's harder to produce that spin and that dip on the ball. So I get lots of questions about how do I get my balls to drop, how do I get them into the kitchen with spin, and Continental, it's going to be a little bit harder to do that, but we still can. There are some top players, Federico Staksrud, for instance, who does a great job shaping the ball. You're just going to have to use a lot more of your shoulder and arm. So in Continental, we're going to really have to brush up with our arm, versus in the other grips, we're going to be able to use our wrist a lot more to create that shape. Serves and returns, the Continental grip is a little bit better than it would be on the third shots. That's because for the returns, Continental is a lot better because you can kind of just push that ball back. It gives you a lot of linear pace. So a lot of the other grips, right, as we put pace on the ball, it translates in two directions. It translates forward into power and up into spin. So Continental is going to translate the most amount of that power forward, the least amount into the spin. So that can be really good if you want to hit a huge flat serve or a deep flat return. So there are a lot of advantages on the serve and return to using Continental, but again, your margins are going to be thinner. And what I mean by that is in the other grips, I can hit the ball high above the net and the spin will bring it down. In Continental, I have to hit a lot closer to the net because there isn't going to be that same amount of spin to bring that ball down. Using Eastern at the baseline is probably the most common of all the grips for our baseline play. This is because it's a nice, easy hybrid between getting a little extra spin, engaging our wrist, and still getting a lot of that linear power. The reason why people are shifting towards those more severe grips are now the paddles are allowing us to get even more spin, which wasn't the case in the past. But I would say still a lot of players are using Eastern, and I think there are a lot of benefits to the consistency and the power that you get out of Eastern. Semi-Western is the other pretty common grip I'm seeing now for a lot of like the drops and drives. A lot of the tennis players coming in are in this grip because it's a very common tennis grip. I do want to cover one thing really quickly though. When we're hitting our backhands, we are always going to shift back to Continental. So even if you're in a semi-Western, let's say, if it goes to our backhand, we're either going to shift here, we're going to slice it one hand or two hands. We're never going to stay in that like severe grip on our forehand to hit our backhand because it would be very hard to hit. So again, semi-Western, a lot more spin as you can see than like Eastern and Continental, but again, we're not going to have that. We're going to have to work harder to produce that linear power because so much of our swing is going into that up spin motion. The last grip is the full Western grip. So one thing you could see how when I hold out my paddle, it's straight down. That's how you kind of know you're in that grip. And with this grip, I would say it's very uncommon still, but there are a few players doing it very effectively. Guangdong and Zane Ford are two examples of players at the top of the game who are creating massive amounts of spin out of this grip. The thing about this grip is you have to use so much wrist to get underneath the ball. So again, because my paddle face is like this, if I just hit the ball here, it goes straight into the ground. So if you go home and try this grip, hit a couple balls, you'll notice they almost will always go straight into the ground because you're not comfortable enough. Like when you watch Kwong play, he gets so low and comes underneath the ball. That's how he's able to get that kind of spin and use that full Western grip. Also with the full Western grip, when balls stay lower, it's gonna be very hard to drop them because as you can see, even here, my paddle, I'm still not under the ball. I literally have to go all the way down and come up on the ball like this, which is much harder. Again though, the benefit is you will maximize your spin. You cannot get more spin than you do in a full Western grip. So if you're looking for spin and dip on your drives, Western is definitely gonna be the best way to do that. But again, I wouldn't recommend this grip. I would recommend probably an Eastern, somewhere between the Eastern and semi-Western grip, personally at the baseline. If you didn't come from tennis, probably leaning more towards that Eastern grip. If you have a strong tennis background, maybe more towards that semi-Western grip. I think as you guys saw in those clips, you can generate a lot of spin with those grips and you get good net clearance, but you can still handle the low balls and it's not too extreme.
The first grip I'm showing you here is Continental. So you'll be able to see me hit some serves with this grip, some drops, and some drives. You'll notice how I have to use my shoulder and my arm a lot, and I'm not using a lot of wrist. I'm more pushing the ball than anything else. You'll also notice with the serves and drives that the ball is pretty flat. It doesn't really dip below net. This is because this is the grip that produces the least amount of spin. Here we're jumping into the Eastern grip. This grip is going to have some spin because I'm using more wrist. It's a nice hybrid between the two. It still has some really good power. This is one of the most common grips from the baseline, and I would recommend it to most beginners. Now we're jumping into the semi-Western grip. This grip is going to be using a lot of wrist, and it's going to see that dip now on the ball, especially on these serves and drives. You can see how the ball's really dipping below the net, and you can see here on the drops how I have to use my wrist to get underneath the ball. The last grip that we're talking about here is the Western grip. So you can see how far around the paddle I am now and how much dip I'm getting on these serves. This grip is going to generate the most amount of spin, but you can see here on the drops how I have to use so much wrist to get the paddle head under the ball, which is going to be more technically difficult than the other grips.
Guys, I've been reading all your comments about things you want to see, and I promise I have them all coming in videos soon, so please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. So you can see in that video, there's a couple things I want you guys to remember or go back and look at. Continental on the drops and the serve was very flat versus Western, right? Tons of spin. So on the Western grip on my drops and my serve especially, you can see how much height I was getting on the ball. Semi-Western a little less, Eastern a little less, and Continental the least. That's because the spin increased as I went. But you can also see in the semi-Western and Western grip that I really had to snap my wrist to get that kind of spin on the ball, versus Continental, I was literally using all arm. So again, the spectrum works. Height and spin increase as your grip gets more severe, but so does how much wrist you use. So Continental is the most arm, Eastern's a combination, semi-Western's still both, Western's mostly wrist. So again, as we progress, we change those couple things, and that's going to change the shape of our ball, but it's also going to change the difficulty of our shot, all the way to that Western grip, which is definitely going to be a lot more difficult. I would say the easiest one, if you're looking to do this, is going to be Eastern. It's going to allow you to get some spin and allow you to get underneath the ball. I think the semi-Western and Western grips are going to be a little bit harder than that, especially because of how much wrist they require. And the Continental grip for these shots, I think, is actually still pretty challenging because it's so much arm, and if you mishit it at all, the ball flies on you. You won't hit as many in the net, but you'll definitely pop a lot up with Continental if you don't hit the ball really well. Okay, now we've obviously moved up to the net. So I do want to go over really quickly the midcourt. We're not going to demo because it's not as important, but in the midcourt and the net, it's going to be the same thing. Only 2 grips we're going to be using. We're only going to be using either Continental or Eastern. In the midcourt, I definitely think maybe it's 50-50. I personally like Continental, but again, the balls really flatten out on you, so a lot of players like that Eastern grip to be able to kind of maybe rip a ball in transition, attack balls out of the air, you can still kind of reset, and you can still hit that two-handed backhand. Again, I think the big differentiator in the midcourt and at the net is going to be, do you use your two-hander or a one-hander? If you're a two-handed player, like a lot of the top girls in the world, they use Eastern, a lot of them. That's because with the two-hander, it's not that hard to do it. A lot of the guys use Continental because the one-handed backhand really is hard to do out of that Eastern grip, whereas the girls with the two-hander can kind of do either. So again, in the midcourt, we're not going to talk about it too much today, but again, I think either one, it's more preference-based. I do think Continental is going to be the easiest to reset both ways, but again, in the midcourt, we're mostly looking to reset. So now, jumping up to net. So again, Continental and Eastern. Those are the 2 options. So what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks? Continental, hand speed, big benefit. You're going to be the fastest and strongest going bang, bang. Eastern, forehand dominant. So if you're hitting a lot of forehands, if you're a player that really likes being aggressive off the bounce, let's say slides a lot to their forehand, the Eastern grip may be the grip for you. I also think, again, like I said in the midcourt, if you have an Eastern grip and a two-hander, I think that mitigates the drawbacks. The big drawback for Continental is going to be you're not going to have as much flexibility on your forehand. But again, I think that's a minor drawback compared to the fact that in Eastern, it's very hard to hit a one-handed backhand. So you can see here how much wrist I have to use. If Zach attacks the ball at me, it's hard for me to get there in time to hit a good counter. Continental, very easy. So again, for me, I think most people with two-handers, you can kind of do either one. I might even recommend, if you're a heavy two-handed player, using the Eastern grip. And if you're more of a one-handed backhand player, I think Continental is the way to go for you. So what we're going to show you now is some of the dinks that you can do out of both and how the counters look out of both. So out of the Continental grip for dinking, again, a lot like our drops at the back, it's going to require more arm. So when I'm dinking, I'm really going to be brushing up the ball like this, not using as much wrist because of the way the paddle sits in your hand. If you try it, you'll be able to see it's very hard out of Continental to snap your wrist. A lot easier out of Eastern. So my dinks are going to look a lot more like this. So again, you can see pretty easy. I can still get topspin on the ball. I'm not going to get as much bite. The other thing you can do out of Continental on the forehand, which is easier than out of Eastern, is it's very easy to go from the topspin to the slice. So now I'll kind of show you how I can kind of move between both of them. So again, this grip allows a lot of maneuverability between different shots. I think that's the big strength of Continental. Now I'm going to switch to that Eastern grip, and you'll kind of see how I'm able to get a lot more spin on the ball, but I'm really not going to slice a lot. So I'm much more likely to back up on a ball to take that topspin than I am to slice it. Good examples is if you watch like Anna Lee Waters or Anna Bright, they're closer to Eastern, and they pretty much topspin everything. I don't really see them slicing almost anything, but they're so good at getting that extra topspin that they're almost always on offense. So if you're kind of that more aggressive, offensive-minded player, this may be the perfect grip for you. So there you can see how I'm able to dink very aggressive, get a lot of topspin on the ball out of that Eastern grip. So now we're gonna jump into speed ups and counters. So for speed ups, there's actually a sneaky little thing I wanna mention. If you're somebody that does like doing the Continental grip like I am, here's a little secret you can use. You can actually use both. So sometimes for me, if I get a dead ball, I'll switch to Eastern to speed up and quickly rotate back. That's something you have to spend a lot of time and work on, but you're not actually pigeonholed into any one of these grips. Here's another secret. A lot of top pros are using 2 or even 3 of these grips throughout their game. There's even some other grips on the backhand we'll go over another time that pros are switching to. So if they're hitting a ball and you're like, I don't see how that's possible, they may be switching grips midpoint, sometimes one shot to another. So again, for these speed ups, if I'm in Continental, I'm going to be really using my arm to produce the pace because I'm not able to use my wrist as much. So it's gonna be, so I can still speed that ball up, but you can see I'm really pushing through the ball and my paddle's really pointed to my target. Very little wrist involved. But again, the benefit would be when I speed that ball up, I'm ready for that next one because I'm in a very easy grip to counter. So this is gonna be the big advantage, right? So whether Zach's speeding up at me or it's my second ball, it's gonna be very easy for me to go forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand. So I'm just gonna do a couple, we're gonna speed some up and you'll be able to see what I mean. Switching back and forth. Now if Zach speeds up the ball, again, I was able to kind of dink and speed up, all same grip. I'm not making any changes. So now we'll switch to the Eastern grip where I'm gonna be getting more spin. It's gonna be more aggressive, but it's gonna be, what you'll notice is on my backhand counters, it's gonna be a little bit harder. I'm gonna have to use a lot more arm because I have to rotate so much further around. So again, a lot harder, a lot more rotation. So instead of that, what I would do if I was playing at Eastern is something like this. So using my two-handed backhand rather than the one, because if you're using your two-handed backhand, your opposite hand takes control, so it doesn't matter so much what grip you're in with your right hand, or your left if you're a lefty, because I'm gonna release kind of with my right hand and take control with my left. So again, that's kind of why the two-handed backhand kind of negates the negative effects from that Eastern grip. But you can still hit backhand counters in Eastern. You just have to know if you're playing against somebody and you're like, oh, I'm losing those hands battles, it may be because their grip is allowing them to hit the ball a lot harder and easier than yours is. So again, I think the key is understanding the differences, because whatever you go with, there's gonna be drawbacks. There's not a right grip all around, and I think if anyone's telling you that, they're wrong. There are times when Continental's king, there's times when Eastern's king, and there are some players right now showing us that semi-Western and Western may be the best at certain times in the game as well. So I think having that balance is gonna be super huge for this. So guys, just to go over what we talked about today. So look at my paddle, right? And as my grip changes, my hand crawls around the paddle, right? So Continental, Eastern, actually I'll get even here for you. So Continental, Eastern, semi-Western, Western. So I'm moving around the paddle with that hand, right? And again, we use this knuckle to tell us, this knuckle. So your index finger, big knuckle, tells you which one you're in. So Continental, you're pretty flat like hammer grip. Eastern, you're on that flat part. Semi-Western, you're on the edge of that flat part. And Western, you're on the next bevel, it's called, is what we know from the bottom here. The next bevel or section of your paddle. So again, as we crawl around, that grip gets more severe. And again, from the baseline, you can use any of the 4. I would recommend kind of sticking to the center 2. That would be Eastern and semi-Western. But if you're a new player, I think Continental may be perfect because it's a grip you can use all throughout the court. So again, Continental may be king in the beginning just to allow you to kind of move around, hit the ball, and not get stuck. You don't want to play, like one of the big things I see with beginners is playing everything in Eastern, and they end up doing this. Right? We don't want that. Like we've talked about in a lot of the other videos, we want us to be countering a lot of backhands and stuff. So if you're sitting in a super heavy forehand grip and you can't control it, it's a lot better. I'd much rather have you in Continental. The other thing is the amount of wrist and the amount of spin increases as we get more severe. So we saw that with semi-Western and Western, tons of spin on the ball, a little bit more height, the ball's gonna kick. But with the linear grips, that would be Continental and Eastern, you're gonna get a lot more power forward on the ball. So if you're looking to really destroy a serve, you're gonna have less margin, but looking in that Continental or Eastern grip, you're gonna be able to hit really hard. So again, there's no one right grip. That's what I wanna reiterate. any of the 4 grips can be used from the baseline. At the net, either of those 2 grips can be used. By having multiple options and learning how to hit out of different grips, it'll allow you to hit different shots and keep your opponents guessing. I personally have actually used all 4 of these grips throughout my career from back here. I started in Eastern, then I went to Continental, then I was in Western, and now I'm pretty much in like semi-Western, maybe a little bit more Eastern. So I've used all 4. At the net, I've used both. I started in Eastern, I'm now in Continental. So I don't think there's a right answer. I kind of think it's more of a preference-based thing, but I think the key is understanding what benefits the grip gives you and what drawbacks the grip has. So if you can understand those 2 things and you make that decision, I think any of those grips we talked about at those different spots are perfectly viable options. Thanks guys for watching.